So I believe have a scope of functional requirements, as in the usage of the application, and then the functional requirements is just to have a reasoning method that achieves these three things. And based on the information I've just collected, I can see the throughput for information being passed to the system for this constraint is like 300 by. Since if I'm okay, let me stop from here and assume that what is the preferred latency of the application? What's the existing latency of the application? If someone wants to interact with the application, I want to view a tweet, I want to tweet. How long does it take for me to type? For me to, after sending, after tweeting and typing the sentence? Yeah.
I guess that's actually a very good question. I was thinking you never asked. So for the latency, let's do. We want to keep it under 10 milliseconds. Yeah, every check, right? So let's keep it under 10 milliseconds. At most 10 milliseconds.
Right. So for 300 tweets per hour by 60 minutes by 60 seconds, and by divided by okay, let me keep it to a second, right? So this is 36 by which is interesting. Oh, if you're not seeing it, I'll put it up a calculator and I'm trying to.
I don't even know if you have to, like, you can just do this and put your meter per second or whatever.
Yeah.
To actually know that.
Yeah. 1,080,000.
Jesus Christ. Refreshing. So this is for a tweet. So if the existing content stuff latency is around the same value, I'm just keeping it to a second yes now. So that will mean, yeah, for 1,000 more for each second time. For refreshing the content, still 15 per second. So it does an additional cost of. And for any other request, so let's use my eyes to do these calculations. 1, 2, 3, 2, 5. Interesting. And that's supposed to be the maximum for all the users that are actively using this. So for the user base of this, you can assume this is the given value for active users, right? So our task is to rate each user so that we maintain a latency of 10 milliseconds for each of them. And I'll start from our usual 10 per second, then we try and move it so we reach our consistent 10 millisecond march. I think that's fine with you, yes?
Yes, it's perfect.
Okay. So from this approach, I am to assume that our existing architecture employs some sort of a gateway or a load balancer that's supposed to load balance load that's being received as calculated over here to the system. So I could start from there, can assume that if this is the current flow of traffic to the system, our task is to ensure that we get unique information from all the users. Yeah, so now my current solution is we believe the number of requests that are getting from our users is exceeding the limits that we want to take on. So it means we are not probably going to increase any existing infrastructure and ensure that we get unique requests, or we ensure that the users still get to experience the app, but not to overwhelm the systems that are supporting it. Okay, so there's not going to be change to the existing architecture. So the problem is to find unique information about the users. Let me go on to describe a scenario where someone will try and access the page within these number of requests that we are receiving at all times. And that is if the user with information the IP interaction with the IP, the IP tokens, or should I say authenticated information. What exactly what I'm going to do is, if I have this user information interacting with the system, we use requests that I'm receiving to ensure that that's okay, perfect. I think I was overstepping there. If this is the kind view of the number of requests that we want to receive, that are receiving from the system, and you want to reduce it so that we can still be able to take on the load, what is the assumed or a tolerable request parameter that parameter value that we should be looking out for? So in the sense that we are receiving this amount of requests throughout the system, like a million requests at a time, what is the required one that we feel we're supposed to help achieve the desired solution? So for a current infrastructure.
Well, I don't think I understand your question. Does anybody else understand?
To be honest, I'm very confused too.
Yeah.
Not even about the question, but like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like I said, we are receiving this amount of requests, right? This is the assumed value we're receiving. And as we already know, we are supposed to create a rate limit that is supposed to reduce or reduce the rate at which we are receiving these requests from the users. And to know that, we need to have an end goal, and I'm trying to find the end goal of the number of requests that we can get from the server. So is there an assumed value that we can pick up from? So this is the we want to go to reach this desired value.
So there's no value. I don't have a value on that for you, right? What I can say is that, so let's say you are an engineer working at Total, and then we are getting 1 million requests per second, and they are saying that, oh, the server handling our backend, or the servers handling our backend, are being overwhelmed by these 1 million requests. And so you have to make sure that not all these requests actually make it to the server, right? So you have to bounce some of them based on the constraints that I have given you. And so, the rest is in your hands. We don't really have, what's it called, a desired value to make things work. But at the end of the day, we want you to design a system that will integrate with our current backend to make sure that the 1 million requests don't overwhelm our server anymore. So trim it down, right?
Okay, yeah, understood. So, like I said, I was trying to describe a use case for someone interacting with the service with these guaranteed information. So, obviously, to be able to reach our service, you need to be connected to the internet via your ISP and network information. So, your IP will definitely be known at the time that you are sending the information to our server. If you are using a token to do any bot related stuff, or to do any processing or anything related to the API via a token, you will definitely know because of the request parameters and headers that you're passing the information to. And as well as when you're doing that for the IP, you also be sharing information related to your account. So you also know that, oh, this user is attempting to do this particular thing. Out of time, see when we receive the information. So if that is that, then I think to attempt the IP address thing, the basic cause of erasing data is for the IP stuff is to ensure that this particular user is not exceeding the limit of what we want the user to receive as in request and response. So in that effect, I can keep track of the user IPs I am receiving, and this of course has to be distributed. So if it means we are getting a given number of users as and when to the particular server, it means I need to keep track of users coming from a particular location. That also warrants me to ask, okay, let me just assume that Twitter is a global, you just said it's a global system, so I don't need to do that. So perfect. So if I'm going to keep track of user IPs receiving, the right option is to ensure that certain users from a particular location can also be noted in the service. So I don't know if I want to do this, but yeah. So the higher level solution will more or less look like a table, a structure that's supposed to look like a table, where we have user IP, the IP address, attempting to access a particular API. So like get tweets, something like this. So to ensure that we have unique and also ensure that we keep the number of requests per the constraints that we have. Oh, who is texting plenty? Give me a second, let me mute Discord. Yeah, so as I was saying, we have a table of the table IPs, and to ensure that we are keeping information relating to that and ensuring that there's a given number of requests. So we should have like a max request to be sent. And also, should there be time bound? Oh yeah, break cooling off period. Yes, sorry. So I assume having a table to keep track of the IPs that I'm receiving or any information related to the functional requirements of the rate limiting should have this form where if a user with this IP tries to hit a particular endpoint, there should be a max request that we should have for a particular IP. And most essentially, the cooling period if we see that it has exceeded the max request. So a design like this would
if I may ask, what table is this?
As in the table, this is a high level explanation of this. Maybe do you prefer I go into detail here before?
Because I don't understand. All I'm seeing is a table IP get tweets, down the max request and a cooling off period. But I wanted to know if you are designing like an actual database table or you are. This is a high level overview of what we are.
This is a high level overview of what's in the keynote of everything. We'll look into details now.
Perfect.
Yeah. So in such a system, this is supposed to be the table and the logic behind the so if a request comes in, we see the IP address, we see this particular IP address, and we route the information to the service, to our existing service, whatever that thing is. Server or balance or whatever. And we keep information related to the IP address. So we create a record for the particular IP address. If we receive another request with the same IP, okay, this is making me realize I missed a particular item. Yes, sorry. So our non-negotiables, as you already described, is that we need to keep the responses from the server at around 10 milliseconds. So for this to be ensured, if we see another record from the same IP under 10, again, we should, or time span, okay, let me do 10. We should update record max. Let me increase this. Sorry.
What record are you creating?
Yeah, we are creating a record for this particular structure for the IP. The request that you're receiving.
We are creating a record of the IP address.
Yes, for the particular IP address.
Is there a reason why we are creating a record for the IP address?
The end goal is to keep track of the users or keep track of the user IPs that we are receiving.
Because if they've told you that our current infrastructure cannot handle 1,080,000 requests, and the solution to it is to create a record in the DB, and whenever we get a request, we go and check in the DB. Does it so not go to the server? Does it make sense for us to go?
Yes, if you say this, then you're also assuming that I have every single thing going to the server. This is not
so before I even come to my next question, what approach? Because I heard you mention a gateway, and I've also heard you mention a load balancer. Which one are we going with?
Okay, just to clarify for me, what I said here is that this is a table, and we are just updating the table here. So
yeah, I do get it. I do get it. But then you say
this has nothing to do with the server.
Okay, cool.
Okay, perfect. So
what is this intermediary between the server?
The intermediary is the rate limiter system that's supposed to handle every single thing that we have here. So
and where does this live? Where does this live? Is this like a new
Yes, so that's why I wanted to assume that the system already has a load balancer that's supposed to do that. So it could leave in front of the load balancer or gateway or whatever that's the server is supposed to interact with.
I feel like you should have asked. You could have asked if I use the load balancer or
I did. I didn't really cause
you assume you said that, you know, whether the load balancer, because you know the approaches might be different based on the actual architecture. So it would have been nice for me if you asked me to now give it to you.
Indeed, yeah.
Perfect.
So to have a system like this, what we just ensure is if an IP address gets to the system, we create a record to keep the information of that. If we receive the records as and when under the given time that we're supposed to return, we increase the request that we are getting for that particular IP address. And if we exceed the max request, we send information back to the
also, I think you have about 12 minutes remaining.
Yeah, so if we get the IP address, we create a record, we update the record, the request that we're receiving. If it's under the required spacing time that we have, and if it's above it, we set a cooling off period. So whenever there's a new request to the system, we ensure that we send a particular information to the server before it even gets routed back to the. We send a particular message to the user before it gets routed back to the server, and that basically solves the issue for IP addresses and things related to the tokens and authentication. Since we have a global system, this means we need to ensure that this table that we are keeping is, in a sense, replicated or abundant across all the stations that we have. So, given I'm trying to describe as a station and as like a country or whatever, yeah. So, any location, possible location, or group of locations that receive requests, we can have a region. Yes, perfect. A region is the right word to use here. So, we need to distribute the information, replicate the information across all these regions to ensure that regardless of wherever the IP information gets routed to, we can ensure this particular record for this particular IP is being used here and here.
So we I get it, right? It makes sense. But my question is that why do we need to replicate the information of the records? Because I mean, I thought the intermediary here was an API gateway / load balancer. So if we are creating a record there, I don't get the flow. Are we creating a record in DB in a different service? Are we creating it on the API gateway itself? If that's the case, why do we have to replicate it? Can you give us a little more clarity on that? I don't know if you get my.
I get your point. I'm still in the higher level for that. Okay. That answers your thing, right? So if we are to consider what you just said, if this is supposed to live in the load balancing information or the logic, keeping the representation as a table here could be anything from a database to a map in the system. In the sense that if this is just a very, very large table or like a map, we can just have this being updated and we can benefit from the efficiencies of just in-memory swaps here and there. The latencies from just accessing the memory will be way less. But in essence, it won't be global to all the servers that we have. So imagine if our load balancer is only available in a particular region, which is not going to be the case. We can have a map there, and the map is just keep information about the IPs that we are receiving and ensuring that yes, we update this record and this particular person is not trying to receive that. We're not trying to cross the maximum request that we can have in the time period we set. That is useful for that end. But in the case where request to a particular region changes from the same IP, we need to ensure that this person is not still trying to change the patterns that it's trying to get to a particular server in a particular region. So the useful end is to replicate the information, which would warrant that we change the way we are keeping the records here. So in a sense, we could rely on the database, a relational database or a non-relational database, but I would prefer a relational database because we believe this can exist as a relation so that we can replicate this using replication means. So if it's like rafts or we have a cluster of, we can create a cluster of DBs that are responsible for this particular thing and use a raft algorithm or access algorithm to ensure all this data is being replicated at a particular time. Eventually,
I don't know what a raft algorithm or pattern algorithm is.
Okay, so a raft algorithm takes on a topological view of like independent databases, right? And I believe the independent databases can be on the servers that are supposed to route information to the the logic here is the main server doing that.
I have a question. Sorry to cut you. You mentioned something can exist. You said this can exist, but here I don't even know what this.
I don't know what you.
Wait, I'm not done. You said this can exist as a relation. So are you talking about the table?
Yes, I was pointing to the table when I was doing the.
I think he actually wasn't down. Maybe if he went on a little.
Okay.
Yeah. Prince, go ahead.
I'll get there very soon. Don't worry. So, like I was saying, it takes on a form of like the topological form of the databases that are supposed to order the table relations that are supposed to be tables, right? I always want to keep up with the higher level because maybe going to the specifics are not really needed. But yes, having a table topology where there's going to be a central node that is receiving the information and propagating to the other servers, and at the time, any particular node or particular service that has this particular table can assume the main central point, and that helps with replication. There are other algorithms that take a different view, where if this particular database takes information, it can replicate that to this particular service. We ensure that any user with a particular IP address that we know cannot abuse the system per the constraints that we set for the rate limiting system. And I believe this is sure.
If I may come in here, right? So you just said that if any user with a particular IP address that we know, but currently in our current design, we don't have any logic in place for actually detecting each IP address that hits our endpoint, for instance. And so, how exactly do we go in the process of knowing each IP address?
I think in the premise that I was making here, I said I was trying to describe a use case for a user, right? So if a user is supposed to interact with your system, it means the person has to be connected to the internet through the ISP and all the routing.
We are getting the IP address from the ISP.
Yes, we are getting it from the use of the internet. And before you are able to receive the request, the connection has to be made, the routing has to be done, and that IP address that we get at your end goal is what we keep.
That's an interesting approach. I want to ask you another question, but let's go ahead. George, I think the time is almost up, right? So maybe we can push our questions to question time so that you can keep it to us. And please go ahead.
Yes, so I was saying this approach really solves a lot of the requirements in the sense that since we are keeping track of IP addresses and most of the things here are probably going to have the same structure, this effectively solves an issue of the IP addresses, tokens, and authentication information stuff. But in the case for tokens, I think we can have an extra layer for tokens because maybe there's a permissible change for people who are using tokens. Maybe believe that maybe if you're using a token, you might be using bot stuff to scrape information from our systems. And we allow that, so that's why we have the tokens for you to use. So in that effect, we won't have this table structuring for keeping off just the IPs and the authenticated information. What we could also have is just a checker for the token side, where I believe when you are interacting with our system through the token, you'll be passing that through the header or the design a body object to be passed through. So if it comes to a server, we can check if the token, is token available.
Is token here a JWT token?
That specific is upon the system.
Okay.
I mean, that's the assumptions that we have to refer of. So when I said,
because you didn't ask me, so I was wondering.
Okay, sure. Let's see. Is token available? So in essence, is token available is supposed to handle the tokens, and if the request for that will have a different max. A token request. Sorry. Which all tokens should abide on. So it won't use the max tokens for all the IP stuff, but it will have a different max tokens for the token stuff. And that could be added on as a follow-on check for token interactions, and do that for the reach limiting information as well. Yeah.
That's interesting because when I asked about the token, he said it depends on the context of the system. If I check on the left, I see that you wrote API tokens. So I was a little confused because that's what I said, API tokens. I don't think maybe that would have changed the trajectory of the design, but yes, there's something extra.
I don't get it from that end. Maybe yes, I understand there might be a difference between what we describe as tokens.
Right.
Yeah. But does that take away from the logic?
No, it actually doesn't. It doesn't.
Yeah.
I think you have like a minute, 2 minutes.
Yeah, so I believe this solution helps limit in the sense that if we receive the information related to the user per these structures that we define, if they cross a boundary that we expect them not to cross, we will have a cooling effect for them and send them back responses that they are not supposed to, like in a case where we adopt our existing system with an API and a REST framework, we will just send a 429. Shouldn't be sleepy around this time. A 429 response back to the user that we have a senior rate limit, something like that. And that is the entire flow of this particular rate limiting system.
Okay, perfect. So, okay, this is fine, right? Let's give some room for questions. I think George, if you have your more answer, maybe you can raise your hand before we take this. So shoot.
Yeah, so I think when you were talking, you said something about IPs and then the ISPs giving out the IPs and all of that. You also mentioned something about regions. So I wanted to know how your system is going to handle one users that have the same IPs, because it counts like if it's based on an IPv4 system, then it means eventually you are going to have shared IPs because of like your user base, and then also the ISPs using address translations. And and the second one is, and
let me answer before you ask.
I think it's tied together, so like you can just take the two, and then the second one is, when the user's IPs change, how are you going to track them? Because from your system, I don't think like there is a way you are tracking the actual user. You are just going off based on their IPs. Bye bye.
Yeah, that's actually a very good question.
Yeah. So to answer the first one, I think you're coming up from a networking aspect, so you expect me to answer the process where if I'm supposed to send a request, the trace of the particular request, and hence, if I am doing that, I want to actually know the IP addresses of the users that are sending a request. We have 5 minutes. Yes, yeah. We current infrastructure of the internet relies on autonomous systems that are supposed to help translations of the current addressing that we have. So if your phone is to make a request to my server, we first need to route these out into your local networking system. And I referenced that your ISP will definitely have like servers to send that information to me, in the sense that I get the request from your end, from your phone to the ISP to whichever OSP, if routing up stuff to the autonomous systems, and then to my service, to my ISP that sets up in that particular region, to my service. So in that trace route, will probably have the information relating to your IP addresses. Even though that won't be known, we will have a NAT to ensure that the NAT is already in place. See, I don't know why you're listening to answer networking question, but yeah.
Oh, it's not like purely networking question, because I think this problem can easily be solved, like if you just like tied everybody's IP to their user ID in your system.
Exactly. Yeah.
That also doesn't solve your question though. When you're trying to say if the IP changes.
No, if the IP changes, then you know that, okay, every time somebody brings like a request, they have their ID, their user ID, and then the IP addresses. So once they bring in a new request with a new IP address, pardon?
Could you repeat what you just said?
Okay, so I was saying, once like a request comes in, it comes in with the user ID and then the IP address. So when the IP changes, the user ID never changes. So you can just like tell that, oh, it's the same user. And if they are over their limit, then you can do your cooling off and all of that.
I think that's what Collins maybe forgot to ask his design was that he needed to ask for clarifications on what actually makes the client unique. Because for me, if you can go to the left, that was why I gave you the IP address, the user ID, and then the third one I've forgotten. If you can go there, that was why I gave it, right? So
the third one is a token,
an API key, API token, right? So user ID, IP address, API key, or API token. So I was expecting that maybe you ask, or maybe in your design, you actually factor in how to make sure that each client is unique, so that you cover. So that you cover the scenario that George asked. But since you didn't ask that, I think he thought it and he also added that question. So maybe that was something, maybe an oversight. But
it wasn't an oversight, it was a deliberate thing. So doing this, I was going to include the executing information related to the user, right? But I saw it's really weird.
If it was deliberate, right, then it means that your entire system has been designed on a lie or a false premise. Because I have given you the facts to work with, and then I thought that maybe you were going to work with the facts, and maybe if you have any clarifications.
That assumption is also rooted in truth, right? In the sense that if you're interacting with the IP and trying to solve the issue with the IP, that IP issue also ties with the specific stuff here. So regardless of the device, we're just trying to reduce the number of reads that are hitting the service, not entirely with it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And also with the whole getting the IP from the ISPs, I don't know. I'm not a networking guy, but does not seem like a roundabout way. I mean, I think you can read the IP address directly from the HTTP request metadata or the network socket.
It's like that. It's like that.
I didn't mention it. You just said we'll get it from the ISP. So I was thinking.
No, don't put me into that box. I didn't mention that with the ISP. I said it's part of the networking. So, like you trying to interact with my system.
But me, I hate ISP.
Well, you did there.
I also had ISP.
You did one of them, please. You did one of them.
Get it from the ISP.
I see what people are doing.
Anyway, like it's recorded so we can check. Wow.
Okay, check. Honestly, I was also wondering how exactly our APIs, because if you are saying that you are assuming that whoever is connected, whoever is hitting our endpoints will be connected to the internet, that is an obvious fact. But then I was wondering how a service like Twitter will reach out to an ISP or will try to, sniff your IP address just based off the ISP they are connected to.
I can say for a fact that that's the reason why you all hyper focus on the ISP stuff.
Because I honestly feel like maybe you could have, if maybe you went with something different or something simpler like maybe the HTTP request metadata, maybe that would have been, we wouldn't really ask enough. Because I'm trying to understand how that is even possible. But that's just by the way, it's fine. We can move on regardless. Does anybody else have another question?
I think they are all fine.
Okay. So my which other question do I have? Let me check. I forgot to write them down. Honestly, so I don't see how this solves our problem, right? So because at the end of the day, it feels like this has just introduced extra overhead. Because we didn't even talk about the actual algorithm that you use for the rate limiting. All we saw was that you are just keeping track of the IPs, and then we come and then we check and we bounce. It would have been nice to actually know the essence of how we were doing that. Because rate limiters, maybe you do.
Yeah, you used to talking back into the stuff, yes.
I didn't see that, so I was also wondering or if maybe you had like an extra 20 minutes, would you have considered such an algorithm?
Definitely. So that's why I was saying that most of the things I was saying here was that high level stuff.
Yeah. Because if we, even if it's high level, creating a record and then trying to sync these records for the distributed system and all those things just sounds like additional work. Or nobody agrees.
You over-engineer, master.
Over-engineer, to be honest.
So you have more time because you started like
I feel like you spend also. If nobody else has questions, maybe we can just go there.
May I start or you like start?
The roast
me, I'm like, I don't like, I was lost. Like,
Yeah.
I was lost. And I don't know if it's because I'm a beginner, but no. First of all, you didn't ask your questions like questions, right? So at the beginning, I think Safo, you said something, and we all thought it was a statement, but you're asking a question. That's very wrong. That's bad. See, relax. It's a reason. I feel like, in all seriousness, like, I don't say we're doing this in like friends, but I don't know if you could have just kept like the interview style, like seriousness a bit, because like this is aimed towards like helping you. So if you enter the interview, you don't make shit back.
I'll let you bastards. What?
See, so
Oh, do you know, like, what he's saying? There was a point where he said something like, he kept on saying whatever, and
Yeah.
yawning. The yawning part, let's say that you are feeling sleepy. Let's even leave that out. But then he kept on saying whatever, and we're also having like some serious internal dialogues, which I feel like,
He used the word fuck you up. He used it like, and I'm like, oh, like if it was like,
In regardless of the case, right? I also feel like most of the things Prince said as assumptions could have been asked as questions, because like
Yes.
I'm asking that whatever, maybe you be like, oh, so this is our API gateway or load balancer or whatever. It's like you ask me, because if we are saying that Twitter is a globally distributed service, and then now we want to build a rate limiter, maybe you should ask that, oh, so since Twitter is a global service, do we have some API gateway or a load balancer? You actually asked that, and I said an API gateway, right? So I was assuming, or I was hoping that maybe you say, oh, the rate limiter will live in the API gateway, so that each request coming in will just hit the API gateway and it passes through the rate limiter before it goes to our other services. I honestly didn't hear you say that.
The black box.
I didn't see it. So I felt like you just kept going, and then anytime you got to a point where you needed clarity, you didn't ask, but you assumed that, oh, I'm assuming that this is this, and then you are just going ahead. Because it's very some way like for me, because I had, aside the part of you asking about the tweets per second and those things, I feel like I had all the facts that I needed, or all the answers that to your question that you have asked. But since you didn't ask, it's like I have everything here, but then when we start, and then
I also felt like when he prompts your attention that he, as an Ernest, when Ernest like is trying to prompt you that you didn't ask, you were trying to fight him, as in like
I said,
and then it just felt a bit like you were not even open to what's, because he was the one driving the interview, but then it actually felt like he had to confirm with you, and you were not even trying to be open to what he had to say.
Right. That's actually true.
So again, I feel like your maths, see the maths part, I'm not blaming you. You said my maths gave ground, that's the calculator, but I feel like you just dive too much into that part. Like,
oh, even with that part, I agree with the fact that the math too.
Hello.
Yeah.
So since the time I've been talking, you people haven't said anything.
No.
Oh, fuck up. See. No. Let me. Oh no. You people were saying something, so I'm just replying from that. Yeah, I think you mentioned something about okay, the last one was when Safo was saying that some things were clarifications and stuff. In most of the cases, when I was saying, can I assume that this is this and that, I didn't get the responses I wanted.
So you ask again.
Ask.
Just ask again.
Last year, I assumed in the interview. I'm assuming that.
It's not like you're talking to us.
Okay, perfect. Okay, perfect. From that end, it didn't look like it didn't sound like a question.
Yeah, it sounds like some internal dialogue going on. But
Okay.
Whenever I heard you ask something like a question, I tried my best to at least give you some facts for you to work.
Right.
And also with them, I think you mentioned the math, right? How did the math influence your design? Because
So the map was supposed to help me do the. You see why I was asking you what's the end goal, what's the value that we are looking after for the thing, right? So doing the math stuff would at least help me know, oh, this is the users that are using this particular information, using the service. If there's a given number of tweets that's being passed through the system at this particular time, how many are we doing? How many are user specific? If the user is doing this particular thing, how can I reduce it to a particular user? So how many is a particular user doing, and how can I reduce it to the particular end goal that we are receiving? So the math part was supposed to help with that. So that's why I was going all over every single time to find the end goal and stuff. Like, oh, this value, what value then do less. I don't know.
So I think I mentioned 700,000, right? But that's just by the way. So I mean, how did the map express your design? I'm not sure if I said it in my head. I honestly can't.
No, I scripted off because after you said there's no, I heard there was no like,
Yeah.
you are just, you made an example that, oh yeah, because you are a social engineer, you're supposed to, yes, we have seen that this is what is happening, so you're just trying to reduce it. So I guess, okay,
You know that to make it awful, or did anybody know that this part was really off? You are having a judge.
so okay, so perfect. I could have communicated that I've cleared this thing off.
Because okay, that's really fine. So now let's say we have 1,080,000 requests coming in, and when it gets here, we create records. I mean, if we do the math, let's say we have like 100, or let me say 10 distributed systems, you have 10 DBs and all. I mean, 1 million requests. 1 million.
No, I'm not really doing that for the numbers for this, right? I'm doing that so I find for a particular user.
The question I'm even trying to get at is that I feel like the rate limiting actually introduce more overhead to our system. With the whole part of creating the records and then you go and check and so that whole part, like if token is available, tokens, requests, you know, it just feels like extra API calls when they could have just sat in the API gateway and kept bouncing from the API gateway level before it even hits our server. Because these will also be servers somewhere that we still don't have to check, which is like extra,
Right.
right. I don't know if you agree with what I'm saying makes sense.
Oh, right. So that informs me to ask this question, right? So what were you looking for a simpler solution? Were you having an expectation for a particular solution?
Yeah, I had an expectation for a particular solution, right? And I also was looking for certain questions, and I was looking for the design to go a specific way. But I think that one will come later. Philippa and Papaya have things to say.
Yeah. Sure. After that, I'll address it from that, and maybe that also helps put things into perspective.
So it's like I forgot what I wanted to say. I think it has to do with the math, because in the beginning he said something. I even brought that in. I was like, oh, you don't even have to like go ahead and do the math. Like, not like don't find out how big or like small your system is, which would inform your decisions. And he confirmed, he was like, yeah, you can just do it. But then you still went ahead and you were still like doing your own math. And the math actually took a lot of time. Like, you now like calculating the exact figure. Because when you look at 300 by 60 by 60, it's obviously a huge figure. You don't need to like, now, I'm of the opinion that in a very like open 45 minutes interview, we don't need to now come and like actually find out the exact figure of what 300 by 60 by 60 will give you. And if the interviewer is saying, oh, you don't need to do the math, and you still go ahead and do the math, and that also like just shows that like this guy, he's come to do what he wants or whatever. Also, I also don't see the part where like what did the math actually do? After all the math, like what did the math like solve in this entire design? Because I feel like
on the bad day.
whatever functional requirements
Why? I didn't
could have been communicated in a way of
I was supposed to get there before 8:45. Anytime that I'll wake up and then go there before 8:45.
need for you to actually do math.
As long as it's before 8:45.
To be honest, it did take a lot of your time.
It takes me like an hour. Draw.
When the interview was nearing the end, you were now like battling through your words.
It did about 7 at
Through your words because time had.
It took me around like 1 hour 15 minutes on average.
So that's also what I have to say about the math. I have other stuff to say, but I don't know.
Aputo.
Can I respond before PY goes?
So I think you can just combine it to the end at the end. So
no, I think it was my best. Yes. So it's a conversation. It's not really about so you
didn't have to ask. You just have to respond.
Yeah. So yes, I think I was doing the math, but I required certain information before I could proceed, right? I think
Fair enough.
if there's an end goal stuff, and you give me like, oh, it's 10 milliseconds stuff and things, right?
You may be asking what is the figure we can cut it down to?
Yeah, the end goal, that particular stuff thing. So when I asked and you gave me a value, you see where I'm coming from?
You don't say anything.
I know.
You know, okay, it's okay.
No, like, because if I say let's even say we are assuming a structure that we are handling with limited. You could have just led with, can we assume that like it's a very, or the activity on Twitter at peak hours, or can we assume that the peak hours is this and this and this and this? Like, you could have just bound it off within with the assumption, rather than adding it as facts. Because here's not where you're coming from.
I feel to understand you on that, and when I was basically just asking the question.
Great. Fair enough. We understand. You ask questions. So let me just say this.
You see, what I get from you is the math takes a lot of time, right? Now, you need clarity on like the end goal stuff. That's why I asked you. And I understand that the review what you just made is the math is unnecessary. I'll take that too. Maybe when I'm doing the interview, I won't go a lot on the math. I understand the review they are saying, but when you see this when the experience was quite different, I don't really get you.
Okay.
I understand.
I think what she's trying to say is you started with like a deep dive way too early. Like, so you shall build it up like in bits. So from one stage to the other, but like you went just straight ahead to like trying to solve like the deep dives and then the actual things instead of maybe bouncing up assumptions at the beginning and then trying to be more specific later on.
How much? I'll do like 200.
If you like, give me some of the money.
I love you. I love you.
So Prince, ask George. What George said is so real. Like you over engineered. You like relax. Let me speak. It's not, I'm not trying to hint on you. Like it's peer review before.
I don't even say anything.
Okay, good. So you made a statement. This is just for fun. But you said load balancer. That's supposed to load. That's just by the way. I just need to that for right. But that's not my issue right now. So the interview is actually all over the place, right? Because
sorry. Abna, you could be available for like some. I have a few kids who want to do prepping for GS, like some girls.
Hey. Have I been to GS before?
So yeah, you just come, we will talk, we will vibe. We just advice, those things, right?
I'm not asking some very tedious questions. Are they in Accra? Do they live in Accra?
Wait,
please focus.
Okay, so I feel like the interview was like all over the place, right? Because it's system design. And if I come back to your design, I get lost at what you're trying to do, right? I'm seeing the math, I'm seeing the table over there. Like, I don't know. I feel like Top Boy can relate. Maybe NS and George, they were really listening in, but I'm just lost.
Yeah, you could have mentioned me because I could also relate. At a point, I was actually lost, and it's not like I wasn't paying attention to. I'm legit not doing anything. I'm just like, but then you were not. I don't know. It was just, and then I feel like, sorry to cut you, but I feel like you should just talk normally, because some of the ways you were talking was just complicating it for me to understand. I don't know. I'm sorry, but that is how I felt. Like, you were saying some things, but I feel like there would have been a more straightforward way to say it, or a very plain way that two normal individuals could understand. I can't give an exact example, but it's really made it more difficult for me to listen in and follow what you were doing. So I had to really, really pay attention, like pay a lot of attention. And I still was confused.
Sure. Perfect. Would you advise I take the same route when doing the actual interview? Like trying to speak English? Or like, I don't know the feel of it, because I believe this is a feeling more than the things being said, right?
Oh no, and I think you can question it. Maybe to just a meeting, but then what if you're interviewers like me? Hey, you never know. But you can question it like with everybody else if they were also confused or they were just confused at a certain point.
I was confused. Like,
Honestly,
it was like in the end, I don't think I understand what you're saying, right? And you're not making use of your whiteboard that much. Like, because if let's say I could read your accents, right, and I was trying to follow what you're doing, it's like I can also follow what you're doing. So I think from what Abida said the last time, the interview is supposed to take like going steps, right? So I think when you're doing your own, you try to start with a diagram and you realize that you have to come with the table stuff and you left the diagram to the table stuff before you went back to the diagram, right? Generally, doing that part is where you like genuinely lost me, because it's like, Charlie, what's this guy trying to do? You stole the whole show from Safo too, and it's like the whole thing felt like it was you talking, like you just talking to yourself. And I think at the point it was like you were fighting with yourself when you were trying to give you suggestions, like I don't know why, but yeah. And yeah, I think I've sent the rest into the group chat because I feel like I'm too much. So you could just read it instead. Just next time, just take your time. It's a conversation. And yeah, like call your balls. Like nobody's fighting you here. We don't want to do your talk. It's like peer review.
But you know what? Basically, what you just did is you gave him a talk. What the heck is this?
No, I'm gonna give you a talk. Like I'm just giving you like normal reviews. Like, but you yourself, if you look at your diagram right now, you will feel like you will feel bad what to do. Like, from start to finish.
if we take a screenshot of this diagram,
Sorry, before you go there, Safo, would the design would have demanded that I do a lot of the diagram stuff?
no. But at the very least, your design should give whoever is looking at it some context on what we are designing. Because if I take a screenshot of this and then I put it, let's say, in a group chat of maybe another developer, maybe I put it, I'm like, what do you think this person is designing? Unless the person actually goes like, oh, can we respect our refreshing content, they won't know that we are doing a rate limiter. Because the diagram doesn't really inform that this was a rate limiter. I mean, if you get trying to say.
I get you, but I also fear I do not know what the rate that should look like.
Okay. So the reason why the question was framed that way was that if we were designing a normal rate limiter, I feel like that would have been much simpler to design. But just for to handle, just for scalability sake, right? I was like, well, let's integrate it into an existing system. I think that would probably guide us in the right direction of what we are trying to do as designing data intensive applications. Yeah. So I get the point as to how you say that you don't know how a rate limiter is supposed to look like. That's actually completely valid. But on my end of the state, right, as the interviewer, like I'm saying, I had answers to a lot of the questions or a lot of the things that you assumed, right? And I feel like those facts or those answers were stuck in my mouth because, like you, I was saying, I was like trying to give suggestions, but then it felt like we're just going back and forth because maybe you have like your own answers in your head and then maybe you wanted to go with that, which brings us to the point of us not knowing what a rate limiter was supposed to look like. So it's actually completely valid, and I don't want it to look like we wanted to be on your top and then we are here, we are trying to like make it difficult.
No. I know it's personal for Papaya, but not for you guys.
So for me,
Like that's not why they come. It's not personal. I'm not trying to like project any like feelings like from the last 2 weeks on Sunday. I've seen.
The way I specifically some feelings like
or why are you doubting?
Okay. So I want to hear a voice, maybe like,
Judge.
Yes.
see, like, for instance, you ask very good questions. So, like, the questions you ask, I don't think if I was in your shoes, I would be able to ask them about, because they really like triggered like some feedback and all of that. So you did well, but just the whole, see, honestly,
What you're trying to do won't change the fact that you are here for
You know we didn't cook you, Prince.
you didn't cook for cooking, but why are you for cooking? That's you. I don't have a problem with you guys.
He's on page 2.
Can we go to like what I was looking for ideally?
Yeah. Perfect. I was going to ask you that.
I should be off by 8:55 or maybe 4:09. So
Just some things to tell me.
let's just yeah. But yeah. So Prince, yeah. So when we started the interview, right? You see that on the diagram we have the rate limiting to IP addresses, to API tokens, and the user ID, right? What I was looking for at the very first time was to say that, or I was looking for how you would actually examine the request to apply the appropriate limits. For me, that was what I was looking for, right? Because we know that, I mean, the API calls can come in multiple ways, right? And so I was looking at how you would identify each client. So I was also looking for you to ask me that, so does our system have an existing API gateway? And maybe if I say yes, you'd be like, okay, sure, let's go with the API gateway approach, which would also mean that the request coming in or the request hitting our API gateway comes with, let's say, authorization headers, it comes with API keys, if it's an API call, other query parameters, also including the client's IP address. It was actually possible to get that on the API gateway level, right? While you can technically make external calls to databases and other services, it adds latency we want to avoid, right? So I was expecting that the API, the rate limiting does it on the API level or on the request level, which our current design didn't, because we ended up making calls to databases and whatnot, which might violate the less than 10 milliseconds that we were looking for ideally. You get it? So the user ID part, I was looking to hear that, I mean, user ID, it will only be for people that are logged in, right? But Twitter, right now, specs, so you can't really browse if you're not logged in. But those days I used to be Twitter, you could browse while you're anonymous. Maybe if you're not logged in, somebody can send you a and still browse while you're not logged in, right? And then, I'm distracted by this. Okay, and then for the IP addresses, you explained that you mentioned NATs and ISPs and all that. The IP address is typically also, if you are using an API gateway, somewhere in there, or you can call it, you can make a request to get it. But that was what I was looking for. And after you would have actually identified how you handle each client, like how you get the user ID, how you get the IP address, how you detect if the user is making an API or bots, like you mentioned, right? Then we'll come to how you actually limit the request based on the rules. That's the algorithm itself. Because at the end of the day, all these things that we are doing in the first place don't really mean, jack, if we don't have an actual rate limiting algorithm, which our current design didn't. The only algorithm we had right now was the whole checking for IP address thing, which is not really rate limiting. We are just checking if we already have the user's IP address somewhere in our DB. And so I was looking forward to hearing a particular algorithm that you would have used in your design, and maybe some trade-offs, because you don't really have multiple rate limiting algorithms. So I wanted to hear, maybe we are going with a fixed window, we are going with token bucket because this and that, or because of this, or because of that. A little pro con, but we can get like price as well, but we didn't really get that, right? Philip, you can go ahead.
So what if this is my first time, like, I am doing an interview where I don't know about these algorithms? What do you think is the best way to go about it?
I think for me, So I'm saying that for me, what I would do if I was in Prince's shoes and I don't know anything about the algorithms is that I will just make up one on the spot. Because at the end of the day, for me, I think that a rate limiter is just a bouncer. So, I feel like it should be possible to come up with your own algorithm to handle this, to be completely honest, even if we don't know about specific algorithms. I'm not exactly sure how it will look like in a professional interview if you explicitly say that you don't know any of these algorithms, because I feel like that would be a negative, because you're asking for if like you know anything, then like you don't know. So at the very least, even if maybe you don't go with the textbook sliding window and talking buckets and all those things, if you understand how it is, works, you should be able to design your own algorithm that handles it. I'm not sure if that works for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be the only way out, rather than saying, I don't know of any algorithms.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
This is the part where I say something.
Yeah, Prince, you can go ahead.
So I think from what Abuna just said could be an example for what I just did here, right?
Yeah.
I would have probably known that talking brackets is there. Okay, in my case, I knew that talking like just say talking bracket stuff then, but I did this. This is no justification that this is a right approach, but I also felt the introduction of Twitter and the assumptions related to it steer this interview this way. I don't know if you agree.
I can agree to an extent, to be honest. I can't. But then again, designing just a standalone rate limiter would have also been something, because we are trying to design something that would work, quote unquote, like what better way than to integrate it into something that we already have. That was the whole reason why I left the question.
So in that sense, in the case where you just have a bouncer for one particular service, like one particular server, like I was saying that if it's supposed to be tied to a particular server, you will be doing things related to map stuff, as in like keeping the record stuff, but it will be done in a map. That's which is basically just talking brackets.
Yeah.
Those are the things. So I was trying to avoid those examples too. So I do appreciate that. Yes, I could have kept to the technical stuff to show like some level of competence and familiarity with these things. So yes, I will agree with that. Yeah.
So yes, that was it for me. And at least when we get to the algorithm side, at least we are done with our research that we could, and then we could have just added some small, because we had no functional requirements for how do we scale to this, the whole math part and all that kind of thing. How do we ensure high availability and whatnot. But we didn't want to do.
Oh yeah, maybe I need to be more explicit here. That's the issue.
Yes. So I did that what I was looking for, but I gave you latency. So I was wondering how you would do these latency and all this. Yeah, really get it as well. That's all from me. I think most of my concerns, PY has added it to his notes and he sent it to the chat. So me, I'm good. I don't know if anybody else had something to say. But I think PY has captured it for me.
Praise, it was nice having you here.
No, it wasn't nice having me here. Yeah. See, the past way you were describing like this scalability stuff, not to justify what I was doing, right? But I was trying to say, yeah, we can do replication across multiple instances in different regions and stuff. So in a sense, I believe it's all because we assumed a functional social media app. So that means it has to be cross-border, it has to be everywhere, and everyone has to be able to access it.
Yeah. But then again, that wouldn't have been the case if our rate limiter was sitting in the API between them.
Yeah. So yeah. That's what I'm getting at.
Anything else? George, BY, Philip, Asante.
Why do you have a problem with me having my tab area on the right?
Because are you Arabic?
I'm not Arabic. Everything is on the right for me.
Wow.
VS Code, get everything down, right?
Okay. My
That
bad.
explains it.
That's what.
That explains it.
So what are you trying to say? Fine. Say
Nothing.
it with your chest.
I'm looking it at you.
Say it with your chest.
So yeah, Prince, as I was saying, today you've shown us and you came for us. So yeah, thank you. Love you. I think so. Who's going next? Because I know we don't talk about me, Prince. Who's next?
Hey,
I think we had a list, right?
George,
Yeah.
George.
Yeah, George.
It's not George. George is busy. George is busy, please.
Abuna, please.
Yes, Abena. George is
The
busy.
last person.
I said I'm the last person.
No,
Wait,
it was
you
last
there,
person.
yeah. And let's bring your list.
Yeah, I'm on the list. Right? So after it was
It was the last person. It was the last person who nominates the next person. Right? That's what we did.
remember the whole random thing, or you forgot?
Yeah.
Hey, who said that? Who brought that?